All right. Good afternoon. This time of year, it's afternoon, not evening, at 5 o'clock, I think. And I'd like to welcome folks to the Tuesday, May 21st Town Council Budget Workshop. I will take a roll here in the chambers. We have Councilor Berthel, Councilor Powers, Councilor Demerit, Councilor Marks is joining us, and I think we will have, I imagine we'll have another councilor who may join us on this beautiful, beautiful day in Orono. Our first item is departmental operating and capital plan review with Public Works. So, Mike, would you guys introduce yourselves and well, I guess Cornell, are you gonna lead it, or how do you want to handle it?
Yeah, we have Mike Smart, Adam Smart, just discovered he has strep throat, so he will not be joining us this afternoon. Scott Lynn, who's head of facilities.
Just so with Adam Spot, he was looking forward to coming here tonight too, so he's.
And Megan's online.
And
Oh,
Megan's
and
on.
Megan.
Give him our best for his recovery.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
Who has strep?
Adam.
Okay, you can
yeah, he
get
tried
started.
that.
We're doing public works first, right?
I'm not sure what you're looking for, but my name's Mike Smart, foreman for Public Works. With this, so I'm gonna answer the questions as best I can. So I don't know what you want, give me a couple questions, I'll see if I can answer them for you.
I'm happy to walk through it. I mean, we have the materials and things like that. I know one of the items that Cordell, Sarah, you can hear us, right? Councilor Marks? Oh, I think she did. Councilor Marks, you can hear us? Sarah, you can hear us, right? Sarah?
Unclear.
Yeah, it's unclear that Sarah can hear us.
I
Yes, you-
can now. It took a minute, but it just kicked in. Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah. I wanted to know, we talked about, in last year's budget, we didn't fill a vacant position, and I know Cornell put it back in this year's budget. And I wanted to hear from the team, you know, what difference that makes operationally in terms of as we consider that proposal in this year's budget.
For the next guy that we.
I understand it comes in at a half year, it's like a half year position, so it'll come in time for the winter snow removal season, is that the thinking? Yeah, okay.
It was either that, which I'm fine with that, or it's when Chris needs facility, or when water pollution needs the guy, he can just come in, it's budgeted for so much. So if he comes in the summertime and he needs somebody for it, doesn't really gonna matter which guy he picks. He just, so whenever he needs the guy, he can come get the guy and it's, so so it's kind of a shared position. He's gonna, you know, half a year for him, but he's not actually gonna be there for the whole half a year in the summer. That's the way I heard it anyways.
Is it funded between the two?
It's gonna be funded between the two. I don't want to speak for Chris. I just talked to Chris a little bit about that.
Half of a full wage or half a wage?
26 weeks.
What's that?
26 weeks.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. And in terms of your ability to be responsive and things like that, I mean, last year we left the position vacant. What did we learn by not having that position? And I
So
mean,
that position, it helps the guys that are plowing the snow, because that position is the guy that does the sidewalks.
Yeah.
So you got the guys that plow the snow, they got 16 hours they can work straight. So if the snow stops, the plowing stops, say in 12 hours, the same guys are gonna jump in that sidewalk machine for that last 4.
Mhm.
You know, that's a little much to ask. So if we had a guy, that shared position, that he will run the sidewalks, but he also will come in and start on parking lots, because we got a lot of, all the town parking lots in the schools. So he helps out with that. Once we plow the parking lots, it's myself or Adam with the pusher and the loader. That guy that does the sidewalks, he comes in with a 1 ton or whatever with salt on it. So when you plow the parking lots, you can salt right behind it. So it's a lot quicker.
Mhm.
And then when the roads start clearing up, he's on the sidewalk machine, so the other guys can either go home after the 16 hours or 12 hours. They don't have to worry about getting in the sidewalk machine, because it's quite a difference. You get in the truck, it's nice. The machines are not so comfortable. So finishing out 2 to 4 hours in a sidewalk machine, it's kind of a little much to ask. So in really what we do see more than just the wintertime maintenance is the summertime maintenance. So I know we've talked a little bit about contract and cemetery out, but still the mowing crew has 36 places they gotta mow. And just one place is the cemetery, and that's like a half of it.
Mhm.
So that's where we see where we fall behind is if we didn't have that shared position, that guy can help out when we need to take somebody off the mowing crew to help pave the sidewalks or whatever. So that's where we get behind.
Yeah.
So when you get behind in the mowing and all that other stuff is when you gotta take guys from the construction side to help catch up on the mowing, you know? Because the cemetery had at one point, had 5 guys in there all summer long, from April 15th, Scott, to November 15th. I think that's what it was. 5 guys, every day was in the cemetery.
Wow.
But now we're asking 3 guys or 2 right now.
Yeah.
We're down a guy. So we're asking 2 guys to do all the town, 36 places, all the town plus the cemetery with 2 to 3 guys.
Yeah, the cemetery had 5 people assigned to it at one
They
point.
did, there was 3.
When I started there too.
Yeah.
There was 3 part-time,
Yeah,
well, I guess they were all part-time.
wow. Yeah.
But most, 3 of them are usually like high school students or
Mhm.
younger people, and then they have 2 older people plus the sexton.
Okay,
And what falls
can I-
behind in
yeah, just a second, Sarah.
All right. what falls behind the cemetery is they have time just to mow.
Yeah.
No extra cleanup of the trees, no extra raising the stones because the flat markers of, over the time they sink.
Right.
So we got a lot of military markers, which we got a volunteer that helps us right now, but it's like 700 veterans up there.
Yeah,
And it's just too bad that the stones aren't up where they belong. If we had another guy, he could do that along with helping out other departments, because we help out a lot of departments.
Yeah. It's a beautiful facility. We drove through it when we were having the conversations about the signs, and it's really well maintained, and it's a beautiful spot.
That's the 2 or 3 guys.
Yeah.
And they're still doing all the town stuff too, so.
Yeah. Sarah, you had a question?
Yes, it's something I'm sure got said. I just couldn't hear it. So the position is being shared between Public Works and what, WPCF or something else? I could not hear.
Yes,
WPCF, yeah,
Yep.
with
Okay,
Chris.
so it's 0.5 FTE shared between those 2?
each gets 0.5 FTE, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so it'd be one full-time, human being
Mhm.
shared,
Yeah.
split evenly between 2 different departments.
Thank you for clarifying.
As is in this budget, it's a total of 0.5 for this year.
In Public Works.
And the other half
Next
is
year
in
it'll be,
WPCF.
I mean, we just put it in.
Yeah.
And nothing in WPCF.
Right.
This year.
I mean, it would only be 6 weeks.
Okay,
6 weeks.
Mid-April through June 30th. Oh,
Wait,
that'd be.
it said December to June.
Yeah, so
So
it'd be 2.5 months. I mean, we can split it. The hours to WPCF, but the way it is right now, it's just in.
so there, and then, so are you saying that when this happened, if this were to go forward, it's a full-time position, it's half-time Public Works this year, next year it's half Public Works and it's half WPCF. Right. That's not been to date, except for this conversation, correct?
The sharing.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
any other, Jacob?
Have we as a town ever looked at just contracting our mowing out totally to leave Public Works free to do other things?
So the contract in the cemetery we have,
Okay,
we've tried it a couple of different times. I think the last contractor then they did a pretty good job.
okay,
I think a few years ago, we got to add another guy to the crew. but then they put him in the cemetery, so we actually lost a guy to the cemetery instead of gaining anybody, so.
That sounds terrible. We lost a guy in
Yeah.
the cemetery.
Yeah.
I phrase it differently, but yeah.
Sooner or later, we all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
But we have, yeah.
Okay, and was there any sort of cost savings as far, that's probably, yeah.
I'm not, I'm pretty sure the cost for the summer was, it was like $28,000 for the contractor. That was 3 or 4 years ago now, 4 or 5 years ago.
And I don't think this maybe conversation for this, but what Scott just mentioned, I think is sounded interesting to me as well, as far as having, this 18-year-old, but probably have to be 18 years old, I guess, to run a mower even. I don't know.
I started at 16.
Did you? Well, that was way.
Yeah.
Way back.
But having summer help coming on for the lawn stuff is something I'm definitely interested to explore, not at this second, but I mean, it sounds like we did it that way. And then we had a contractor, and I know two more people came on, and part of, I think, the arrangement with having the 2 more people that came on 5 or 6, whatever years ago, was taking back the cemetery. Now we filled one of those 2 last year, and now it's being proposed that we fill the other. So there's many configurations and ways to do it, and I do think that where that's sporadic work, I mean, it only grows when it grows, right? So I do like the idea of leveraging not interns, but there's usually kids that are home from college or out of graduated that are looking for work, so maybe there isn't any more.
I don't like to jump in. Historically, there's a reason that we moved away from that, because one of the largest workers' comp claims that we've ever had came from part-time work in the cemetery. And so it cost us a ton of money because it was young people doing this, and that's one of the reasons we moved away from it. So I'm just giving you that historical, there was a reason why that changed.
That's helpful. Thanks for chiming in on that.
Yeah, I didn't know if that was a good time to bring it up, yeah.
Good time as any, Judge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A caution.
Yeah.
Why we haven't used part-time.
Institutional memory is important. Yeah.
And in the cemetery too, because I run the cemetery, but even though we do contract it out, we still have to do the burials, we still have to sell the lots, all that stuff we still do. But the mowing obviously is the big thing, it's up there for 3 or 4 hours string trimming today, because Memorial Day weekend's coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's gonna look perfect, so yeah.
Yeah.
That's when I was thinking that maybe that other guy would be nice right now, so
Yeah.
the foreman don't have to do it.
Yeah.
Is any other questions? I'd love to hear from Megan too, if she's still with us before we move on, but.
Yeah, I was curious to hear from Megan both any updates on trash and recycling and also, I guess, general updates. Megan, anything you've got that you wanted to share with us?
So nothing really in my budget. I don't have too many surprises. I guess I mostly am looking to see if you guys have any questions for me. Can you hear me?
I'm sorry. Yeah, we got you.
I know you've had success with pursuing some great grant opportunities in the past. I was curious if there were other things you had in the hopper that you were looking forward to this year, and if you could just share a little about that, if so.
Sure. Something you might have seen that was a little different was the materials and supplies and outreach line for $2,500, and that line was specifically put in for window dressers events, which has been an annual event that we've been doing, and then weatherization projects as well as climate action projects. So that is where that line came from, and that's really the only difference that you'll see in mine. Just to support some of those projects as we move forward with the climate action plan that we're going to be doing with Bangor and the other regional municipalities.
And Megan, the garbage pickup falls under you and in environment. as well, or is that not the case?
That's right. So the changes that you see here are from, we were in a previous 5-year contract that was a pretty sweet deal. And when that ended, we sent it out to bid and we only got the one bid from Casella, which was the automated side load. And so that's where the prices are reflected there and the differences that you see. So what happened was those lines got shifted a little bit. You see page 49, it says on the top. I'm sorry. I'll give you a second to get there.
Got it.
Got it.
So those are probably the biggest, what looks to be the biggest changes, but really it's swapping some funding from one line to another is really what happened. Because we moved to the automated side load, the payment for both collection and processing of those materials are now coming from the curbside pickup line. Whereas before it was split with recycling, which is right above that line. So that's why recycling is dropping, because that's only paying for the processing of recycling, not the collection of recycling. And now the collection and the processing is getting put into curbside.
Sorry, what,
You said
Page 49.
Okay, that makes more sense. I was like, maybe there's multiple 49s. 46. Great.
Orono resident Jim Dunning is watching. It's worth every penny, Bill, right? So just in case she's watching at home. Yeah. Jacob, you had a question?
Yeah, so in the salary line, so that one of the responsibilities of the environmental services office is to apply for grant fundings to fund different projects. Specific question, I guess, but just ballpark. Approximately what did we bring in grant funding related to that last year? And then what do you have in the hopper for this coming year?
Yep, I can, also Jacob, nice to meet you. I don't think I've met you yet. I can send you, if it's helpful, I can send you a specific email of the breakdown of all of the grants. I don't have it in front of me right now. But in the last 2 years, it's been over, a total of 200,000.
Okay, perfect.
But I can get that broken down by year and what's in the docket for this year and get that sent out to you guys.
I don't need that level of detail, but if anybody else wants it. No, thank you.
I think it's a good investment though, in terms of time and return on investment.
What I was
Yeah.
getting at. I
Um,
think it is.
I'm interested in, if there's a report that could be added to the drive, I'd be interested in it, Megan, but if it's not easy to produce, please don't produce a new document.
Okay, no problem. I can upload one.
Okay. So Zach maintains that Google folder for us, right? The budget FY 2025 stuff.
Megan, I was curious, or I've been curious lately, thinking with students leaving and whatnot. Seems like I think they take a picture these now and they know like everything about every piece of anything they pick up. And I would be curious, I guess, longer term, just kind of planting the seed for after the summer, understanding what the pickup was like January to May and then May to September. And
As far as trash.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, because I mean, I think there have to be, once students leave, there have to be a lot less barrels that they're actually picking up, and they probably know that to a T. I think that would be interesting information for us to hear back from them about.
Yeah.
From Casella.
Sure,
As
I will look into that.
Probably weigh the trucks every time they dump them, so.
That too.
I can find out
Anyone-
that information, Leo.
Yeah, and I guess it's sort of like for future, because we're just getting into that season where they're gonna have a lot less, I assume, so. I just want to make sure that was factored into our contract, of course.
That's right.
Anybody else have anything? I've got a couple items before, but just, so Megan, for you, and Sarah, for you, for our work plan for the council, we're gonna have to update the trash collection ordinance at some point, because it had, and I mean, this will be work that we have to do as a council. We have, we gotta go through our ordinances. It's time to freshen things up, right? But the trash pickup ordinance doesn't reflect the fact that we're a bin-based, we have a bin-based service in town, so we'll have to, at some point, we'll have to, not for the budget, not for bills, for Bill Cody's with us, our incoming Public Works Director, for those who can't tell by the back of his head, watching at home, and welcome, thank you very much for joining the team. And so not for your first day, but at some point in the next year, we should look at that, and among the other things we need to update in the ordinances. I wanted to share and thank Sarah. I think this is a Public Works item, but Sarah forwarded this to me and it actually came into I think probably all got it in our promotional folder file. We were invited to a seminar next week on funding to support improvements to crossings, train crossings. So I'm going to attend that webinar. Anybody else who wants to attend, if there's an appropriate staff member to attend that, I think it would be great. We had, for members of the public and Bill, for to bring you up to speed, we had a really interesting, informative discussion with the CSX.
It is, yes.
On April 1st and around their future plans for Orono, their investments, well, the whole rail line, but they've got 6 crossings in Orono. So I'm interested to know what we could do to improve the safety and potentially even maybe pursue a quiet zone that would involve a lot of investments around our crossings, keep people safer. But I think that's something I'm interested in, what other kind of resources are available other than tax dollars, local tax dollars to pursue stuff like that.
And the trains are about doubling in speed within the next couple of years as part of the reason that thought about safety at crossings is something we're looking ahead toward.
Yep. Yeah, they aspire to go 49 miles an hour through our village, our neighborhoods. So also interested in talking, just to put a placeholder in it, about opportunities for collaboration with the schools around our facilities work and our public works. I don't think we could ever have a better time given who we've just hired to be our public works director. And just the fiscal challenges that the schools have in terms of their, meeting their needs for funding, and then, the challenges we have as well. So just to the extent that we can start thinking about, for next year's budget, as part of that work plan, how we think about that. It's a great place to start. And we've got room to collaborate in a lot of different areas, given that we've got a university in town and all the other things. But I wanted to ask, I tested I spent about a half an hour just crossing the streets downtown on Main Street, and I really like the delay. So I really like that a lot. And I'm interested in, I suppose it's probably part of our Route 2 discussions, Route 2 corridor discussions about how you get those. They're different, it's like there's the structure of the crosswalk things, or some of them beep at you, some of them don't, some of them light up when you press the button, some of them don't. So that's kind of interesting. I like that we've added the delay. I think that was a responsive step, and I'm interested in that, just to kind of have a placeholder there too, as we talk about safety improvements in the downtown. So anything else from anybody else?
I was curious about the Martin Park expense and what's gonna happen there. Anyone? There's 50,000 for Martin Park. That's all I could.
Dugouts.
Was it?
I think that was for drainage and dugouts.
So Megan might be the best.
Yeah,
one
Megan
to
might
answer
be.
this question. I believe that had to do with, not this Megan,
Yeah.
Megan Mazzella.
Yeah.
I think that had to do with, and we can circle back and give you an answer, but I think it had to do with the dugouts or falling. And some drainage issues.
Yeah. Like out in the right field, there were some drainage issues out there. I don't know her whole plan. You'd have to ask her.
I just got a text that says saving for the drainage project. There is a project that we had done work on 3 or 4 years ago. I believe we came and talked about a pump track and some other things, the possibility of there. And when the pump track moved and went up to the high school, the rest of this was put on hold, but there is a major drainage project. There was some engineering and some preliminary work around a drainage project in Martin Park. And so I think that's what that was.
So that's a placeholder or a,
Saving for the bigger project, which I feel like was like $300,000 5 years ago.
so I guess next question would be, what is that? We don't have a designated
It'll go into reserve,
reserve, but is it undesignated? Or
reserve
designated?
for Martin Park drainage.
There is one?
That's what it's going to.
Be a new reserve fund.
It'll establish a reserve fund. I do recall seeing a plan of improvements for that field that are hundreds of thousands of dollars for fixing it up.
Was that part of this? They were talking about doing something else additional there, I think, at some point too. I
Yes,
didn't
so
know.
there was like I said, there was a comprehensive plan to look at Martin Park and bring it all back up to have it be able to be played on in the spring because it doesn't drain, dugouts, lots of different things. There was an idea of a playground being out there, parking on Crosby Street. And that was north of $300,000. Don't quote me on this, I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago. And basically, there is no fund, and I think this would start a reserve fund to be putting money away so that we could do the work on that.
Thanks.
All right, anything else? Thank you, by the way, for the work at the St. Mary's, that we call it the St. Mary's Field still, it's not like it, so. I had an email from a parent and then I actually whipped it out in a day or so and it really made a huge difference there. And it's nice to see as I was riding in today, one of the thank you as we were online, seeing the safety signs go up on Main Street, the speed signs. So those are an exciting addition to town. So thank you for that.
Well, nice to see, at least down on Main Street, the crosswalks getting repainted too. Especially with kids about to get out of school here and stuff and just being in town more. I think it's important. And we seemed every year, it's always, they're coming next month, they're coming next month. So I think that's pretty good shape for us, the fact that they've gotten there. I don't know when they'll get to the rest of them, but where there's so much focus on safe pedestrian stuff. I think those are definitely important pieces and glad to see that. I walked over 2 of them before I realized, hey, those are new. We got them.
Yeah.
To test the lights like
No, I was.
Half an hour, I tested them all.
Speaking of crosswalks, I sort of anticipate that members of the community will ask me this after this meeting. Are we gonna do a rainbow crosswalk again? Awesome. I know that's popular among a bunch of folks, so.
Yeah, we'll get that in next week, another week or so for sure.
Great, thanks.
All right, well, thank you very much for stepping up and helping us and hopefully you won't have to do this again for any time soon.
Yeah.
We'll have Bill on the hot seat next year for it, so thank you very much.
Yeah.
And thanks for all you do.
Oh, I found a proposal from Oliver in 2018. Martin Park, fencing, under drain, parking, drainage pipe, grading, new loam. 350.
You know when the reserve account date, is it just starting this year?
Yeah, but this includes, you mentioned pump track got moved,
Yeah, that's not part of that. That was
so
at
that
the
you
time.
take out 15,000 for pump track.
And that probably significant to that because it was 6 years ago.
So, but we didn't start
We didn't
saving
start
6 years
at the
ago.
time, it kind of got tabled and I think there was a lot of sticking points around the pump track. When we did that just kind of got tabled when they moved in.
All right, great. Well, thank you. Megan, thank you for your work and for being with us this evening or afternoon, still afternoon. So thank you.
You're welcome.
To WPCF. So you want to do?
Could I just point to one, Mike's here under, so it'd be page 150.
Great.
So the-
And this is still under Public Works.
No, it's in the
Oh,
capital.
okay, I see, WPCF.
So that's all the road projects for the year. So the MDOT mill and fill, it goes the way down, it says 87,000. So DOT just sent me an email that they opened bids and the bids came back 51% higher than they budgeted, 416,000 over the department's estimate.
Wow.
We're responsible for 10%, so instead of 87,000, that'll be 135,800. Mill and fill project on.
You create a $50,000 reserve for the Martin Park and you take it on the cost of pavement for, yeah.
We will just adjust the revenue from the reserve fund.
Okay.
The infrastructure reserve.
Yes,
One that we're gonna have 150,000 left in.
which according to
If,
Rob,
if,
was the plan to bring it down.
yeah, I guess that's probably a plan we have to still talk about, obviously.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
Who's comfortable with that plan?
Okay. And Bill, when do you start?
Well,
Right. I think we talked yesterday. I know folks on Forest Avenue, Jacob and I are gonna connect you with the folks over there for a walkthrough once you get started on the traffic calming, and they're really excited about. We had a similar event in Webster Park on the drainage project, sewer project, and I know that people on Forest Ave are excited to have that conversation, get that project done for the summer. So
Dan?
On that,
hear the trains. Hold on, I'm getting worked up. Scott's a lot better than I can for my, geez. Yeah,
Dan?
Sarah?
Yeah, I just actually wanted to point Leo's attention to the fact that Zach did share out with us a capital reserve funding history. Have you seen that document, Leo?
no,
I'm sure Cornell could get it to you, and I know you want to have this discussion, but it does show how much money has been transferred into the capital infrastructure reserve each year for the last 5 years, and we can see the data back to 2020. So there was 376,000 that went in 2020, 218 in 2021, 354 in 2022, and 411,000 in 2023. So you were asking how fast it tends to build back up. I thought you might want to look at that data. Just wanted to highlight it for you.
thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. And next we're talk about sludge next, right? So Chris warned me about it last night. He said, hold on to your seat. Yeah.
Boil some water and make it while we transition. Be right back.
look at Johnny Cash.
I'm going after those trains, I swear. Gonna ride those trains for as long as it takes.
Johnny Cash.
Mhm. I wouldn't be if I lived where Scott lives. Yeah.
Hey, just for clarification on this, I think is that what you just handed me, Mitch? There's capital reserve funding and there's FYE operating balance transfer. Those numbers you just gave were balance transfers, correct? So that wasn't funding that we put into that we've allocated revenue for. That is end of the year stuff that got moved over. I assume that's what.
That's my understanding, Leo. Staff had answered us that the way that fund has been getting filled up is by operating balance amounts being rolled into it at the end of the fiscal year. So I assume, but that's really a question for Cornell. My assumption is that that's the operating balance that has rolled in at the end of each of those years. So you're correct. It's not something council was designating. It's what we've been doing with remaining balances as they've been being pushed forward into that fund. But you had asked the amounts when staff brought that up. And I believe that's part of how we got the sheet. So I wanted you to see that that does show us the amount that has typically rolled forward each year. Cornell, I do have a question about that. When I look at FY24 on that, it shows 0. So are you predicting that because we would be doing such a large capital infrastructure project on Webster side, that at the end of this fiscal year, we would be rolling no money forward to the reserve account. We would instead be using that money toward the Webster project. Is that correct?
Yes, it's what Rob had said, that you put generally 800,000 tax money towards the infrastructure, and then what you have left over, you put into the reserve. And you build it up. And he identified the Webster project as drawing down.
So that Webster project was not on a capital plan, so that's where I'm not quite following along. So I understand that's what's being said now, that where it's that at this point.
The
Rob had
Webster hadn't
suggested
been talked about?
it had not been on a capital plan. It had been talked about. It had not been on a capital plan. Usually, I would think it would either an emergency or it was something on the plan that money would be working towards. It wasn't on the plan. So that's, I guess, my point there.
Fair to say,
Yeah.
Is they need immediate.
Yeah.
Sorry, can someone repeat? I couldn't hear Cornell.
In the Webster neighborhood.
what's that, Sarah?
I just couldn't hear what Cornell just said, and I would love to hear. Could you repeat it, Cornell?
Just that the pipes are in need of, I'm just surprised that it hadn't been talked about before as part of a plan when the condition of the pipes
It-
show that they need to be replaced.
Actually,
promptly.
it was on the WPCF. The sewer pipes is in the WPCF plan. The water pipes are not on public
The drainage?
plans. Yeah.
Yeah,
So those
that's-
are.
I think what brought that forward was in the very beginning, they were gonna try to do the whole project with ARPA money. And when it was decided to just use a portion of the ARPA money for that project, they decided instead of to abort it, they decided to take the rest out of reserves. So that's where that whole thing was born from.
Yeah, that's the same.
I would like to mention that we have 3 contractors interested,
Great.
and they all are asking if they can bid now and do 25 work. So the reason being that they're busy, they have jobs.
Yep.
They weren't even, we had to call them because they're not actively looking for bids for jobs. So we called them and said, hey, we got some work in Orono, are you interested? And they said, we're interested in bidding now and doing work in 25, which in the end is probably the best thing because it's late in the season and they need to build a schedule, they need to line up materials. You know, we got to go through the process and get it approved. So they're not even going to start for probably another at least 6 weeks. And then the next thing you know, they're over there working and it starts to snow. So it's probably the best thing that we do. If we do hold until 25.
So can I ask, was this in the way we put the bid out, they had to bid on everything, right? We wouldn't accept
We
any
didn't break
bid.
it up. It costs more to do that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well-
contractors don't like to bid jobs like that.
But I wonder,
A lot of times they'll turn away and not do it.
if there'd be more potential contractors that could say, take advantage of the sewer on Peter Street, which I think is the highest priority, but I wonder if it were broken up, if that broadens the field of who can compete and who can play, and maybe we get
It,
pieces of it done.
it more than likely would, because you would have, contractors that aren't quite so big as the ones that have been on this job.
Yeah.
You know, there are contractors out there that are limited to the size jobs they can do.
So, but we have an RFP out there. We're gonna get responses to it. We're gonna let people know that they can potentially do the work in 2025. And then the preferred response, the best response, you staff will bring that back to us for our consideration. And we need to be careful.
We're still keeping the bid dates, the bid opening and the free
Yep.
bid. And,
Yep.
So hopefully we'll come to you with a low bid.
Yep, and then we need to also, well, weigh that against the importance of, I mean, we don't want to be the town that gets reputation of, pulling contractors, getting them to bid on stuff we're not gonna do, so.
It's not the first time it's happened this way.
Yeah.
We've stalled bids before because it got late in the season.
Yeah, no, that totally makes total sense. I appreciate you've been really transparent with us about the opportunities and challenges over there, and I know it's really been helpful to me in terms of how I assess it, and I know even people have different points of view on it, I know they still respect that you're coming and giving us your best and, your best advice, so I appreciate that.
Dan?
So let's talk, yeah, Sarah.
Yeah, I wanted to say, I think on the piggyback on that, just a big thanks to Chris and for getting that information and the bids out. It's really exciting to me that we have those coming back. And I appreciate this information that sort of showed us how much money does typically get pushed in to the capital reserves. That helps me to understand how fast that will start to build back up again, which makes me feel much better. I don't know if it helps Leo, but I was always in favor of the project, but I'm happy to see those numbers. It makes me feel more strongly in favor of it. And I appreciate Leo's concern about where this project was listed, and I do think we should look at that for the future. But I wanted to reiterate what was stated, that we have been hearing about it as part of ARPA plans for quite a while. So I think the issue is, Leo, is to make sure that the ARPA funds, if we ever have another similar fund, that it still gets tracked on the capital infrastructure plan. It seemed like there were two separate things. There was the regular capital infrastructure plan, and then there was the ARPA tracking plan, and they weren't merged together. So I do hear that, but I think this is an important project, and I'm appreciating the information staff has brought back. Thanks.
All right, let's get into the budget stuff, if that's okay. Yep. Take it away. You want to walk us through your presentation?
To be honest with you, this is not the budget I wanted. My budget was been taken in different directions for two different reasons. Number one is the Route 2 project, which we didn't know was coming. I originally wanted to get the Webster project behind us and start to focus on the plant, the physical plant. We can fix pipes and get water down there all we want. We have to have a plant to treat it. And there's a lot of processes of that plant that are getting old, they need attention. And I wanted to start to build reserves to do that, and then DOT comes in with a $30 million project that they want to put on top of a pipe that's 100 years old. So it would be irresponsible to leave that pipe there, but I obviously don't have the money.
Yeah.
I don't see any other option other than borrow it. My department right now owes 6.4 million on past projects. My budget pays roughly $600,000 a year on interest and principal. So the last thing I wanted to do was borrow more money, but here we are. So let's have a discussion on what you think. I mean, I have in my budget right now, 180 to design Route 2. Because that's going to have to happen before, I mean, that's the first thing that has to happen. But if we're not going to borrow the money to do the work, I can use 180 somewhere else. But like I said, it would be irresponsible to leave that pipe. It literally was laid there in 1924. And it has issues. I had all of it videotaped last year. We knew it was bad, but now we know how bad. Some areas are better than others, but you can't just replace pieces of it. It's all 100 years old.
Yeah.
So before I move forward with leaving 180 in the budget, I guess we need to know that we're going to move forward and replace the pipe.
Yeah,
The unfortunate thing is the $3 million match can't be used for that. Can be used for the infrastructure.
Right.
So you have to borrow more.
So I look at this as, I think Route 2 is transformational opportunity for Orono, the project and the amount of the federal dollars that come with it. And I wouldn't want any one department to feel like it's their burden to bear. I mean, the council and the community are gonna have to make a decision whether we want to go forward. And we're gonna have to get you the resources you need to do it. And we'll have that conversation as a community. We're gonna get the plans back, at some point, some plans back and start having more conversations. And then if there is an interest in Orono and making this really impactful investment potentially, I don't want to, I'm biased for it. I think it's likely gonna be something we really look back at.
An added benefit to a job like this is all the service laterals from each home will be replaced to the right, to the edge of the right of way.
Yeah.
So all of the pipes that come from the homes on Main Street will be brand new, basically from the lawn side of the sidewalk into the street.
Yeah.
For some people, that's almost the entire pipe. And we've had homeowners in the past will come out and say, hey, you know, what will it take just to do that last 50 feet?
Mhm.
So all my pipes brand new.
Yeah.
You can't get it done any cheaper because you have a contractor on site.
Yeah.
It's already got the place dug out. So there's a lot to be said there.
Yeah, no, I'm hearing. I don't know if concern is the right word, but you're a very earnest steward of your fiscal plan and town resources. And I guess I'm just saying to you that I think that it's. The community's gonna understand you're gonna need help, and that these aren't the way this isn't the way you would have sequenced it. And if we do act on the opportunity, we have a burden as a community to, support the work that you do, and I want you to hear that from us, so as we move forward, yeah. But. And I don't think we can't make a decision, we're not
Well,
making,
to the question too, I'm not, I heard one meeting about Route 2, but I couldn't tell you. People ask me what's going on. I'm like, I really don't know
I
what
was
this
at the meeting.
transformational thing is that's gonna happen. I don't know that the state
We're gonna have
knows.
an updated meeting probably in the next 6 weeks.
July.
July,
In July, we're gonna bring something to you folks.
Yeah.
And then a week later, have a public meeting on that. We're trying to make sure that we touch base with people that may be affected. With some of the things they might see in this plan before we do that.
sure. Surprise, yeah,
So, yeah, and that's back to, I fully support what you're saying, and that makes obvious sense, Chris, as far as that we need to do the studying. But my question that I don't know the answer to is this something that's already approved by the state? Is this a guarantee that they're gonna spend the 30 million? And if not, then what's the timing on that? And when does it make sense that I don't think we're gonna go spend 180,000 to study it if the rest of that isn't happening. So it's kind of the cart before the horse, or,
I need to ask Rob, when do we know that the DOT has federal money for this job? And his answer to me was, if the community agrees to the match, they'll more than likely get it.
Yeah.
If the community doesn't want to match, they'll move on.
there was a really good, it's on tape, the February 28th hearing, it was a February 28th, Mitch, or something right about then. Mitch organized a great public hearing, and the team, I don't want to not give credit to whoever else contributed, but so really, it's an hour and several of us were there, and it was a really good conversation about what the opportunity is, what other communities have done. You drive through communities like, Belfast and Wiscasset, Hollowell, they've really taken advantage of this to really, make some significant changes to their downtowns, in a way that I think it really reflects well on the success of the program. And anytime you're getting a 90% match, it's something you want to have a conversation about, so.
Yeah. I am curious if, the Route 2 corridor sort of didn't take over your budget and shift things this year. What are some of the priorities that you would have or that you're looking forward to in the longer term in the future?
I would have worked towards dewatering alternative.
Say that again.
What we have was installed in 91. The technology is 1950s. And there's just, there's technologies out there that gives you a drier product. And that's another thing that's steering my budget is sludge disposal. And as you all know, sludge right now is a crisis in Maine.
Yeah.
And it's gonna get worse soon. All of it now goes to landfill. None of it can be land spreaded, none of it can be composted. It all goes to landfill. You can't just keep piling up wet sludge, it'll fall over. So the state has just completed an evaluation on what they need to do. There's a lot of good ideas. They're years out and they're lots of money. There is one facility that's getting close to breaking ground at the Norwich Walk landfill. They're gonna build a dryer and use the gas from the landfill to to energize it to dry sludge.
Oh.
And they're looking at doing some of that in some other areas of the state. That'll reduce what needs to go to the landfill. If you dry it, you don't need to stabilize it.
Yeah.
So for us, I've got more money in my budget. I've got $125,000 that'll help me get a drier cake with the equipment. The way I can do that is to run it slower. We remove the water from the sludge with pressure. The longer you squeeze it, the more water comes out, just like a sponge. You squeeze it quick, you get some water out, you squeeze it for a long time, you get more out. The trouble with that is I need to move 75,000 gallons a day. That takes about 8 hours. When the truck is not at the facility, it's at the landfill, we have to shut the press off. And it wasn't too bad when he had to drive up and drive back, but because they have so much traffic up there now, it's, I've actually kept track. My guy, on average, waits, after he goes across the scale, on average, he waits 77 minutes before he can dump his load.
Oh, wow.
Every time he goes out.
Hmm.
So that equates to about $9,000 a year for my guy to sit there on his phone playing games, waiting for the guy to tractor to say, come over here and dump, because they're so busy. So I'm trying to move towards having somebody else truck our sludge for us. I can free him up to do other stuff. And it will give me a 30-yard container instead of a little dump truck. And I can start the press and let it run for 8 hours and not shut it off. So that $125,000 or 75 this year is to work towards that. I need a special conveyor system to fill a 30-yard container. We can put it in the garage that we use it, the truck now. But that conveyor is not configured to fill a dumpster from one end to the other. It's just a little truck sits underneath it. With a container, we need to move it to the other end. So we need a special conveyor to do that. So, and that was originally part of the plan for dewatering alternative. So if I do that now, when it comes time for some type of new dewatering, this piece of the project won't be there. It'll be already done. So those are the two things that added a lot of money to my budget, and I'm asking for a 50-cent rate increase per 100 cubic feet to do it.
What's that equate to, do you think, for an average?
I think at 40 quarter. $20 per year, so $10, a 50-cent increase on 100 cubic feet. On the average consumption for a homeowner is $10 per quarter, so $40 a year. For your average.
Hmm.
That's based on a consumption of 300,100 cubic feet.
Great.
Or 30 million cubic feet.
Thanks for running the numbers for us in
Yeah.
real time here.
What's the, what is your rough estimate of how much it would, are you looking at to spend to do the complete dewatering situation? Like,
To put in a new
Just roughly.
dewatering equipment. I have a price now of 2.7, but I think that's kind of high. And that, I know it's high because that includes the conveyor we just talked about. So if we do that now and do the dewatering, you know, in a few years, it would be less than that. I do know of a facility that put in the technology that we're looking at, and they estimated at 2.4 their facility, and they had it put in for 1.8. So.
And it would cut the cost of dumping it right now about how much a year? Just curious.
I don't have any hard figures on what it's gonna reduce, my quantities by.
Yeah.
Just off the top of my head, I would say it would probably bring us, instead of 1,500 ton per year, maybe closer to 1,000. So we're paying $85 a ton. So 4 times 85. And that's based on a 20% solid. If we can get 22%. You know, every percent matters. Quite a bit, actually. And another issue that may arise is there's only 4 sites in the state of Maine that will take sludge in a landfill. And some of those have moisture limits. And Juniper Ridge has made some noise about having moisture limits, which means 20% or don't bring it. Or 20% and a surcharge for every percent that you're below 20. That's what the landfills that have a moisture limit now do.
Yeah.
So if it's 20% and you bring in 17%, they're charging $7 per ton for every percentage point that you're below. So it can add $20,000-$30,000 to fees, just because your sludge is too wet.
So what do you currently have in your reserve right now then? I tried to look on and I don't think it's on.
For which one?
Well, what I'm getting at is that, you know, at 1.8, is there a way that we can move, if there's enough between your reserve, I'm just trying to figure out if there's enough reserve money between different accounts that, you know, between that and then cutting elsewhere out of the WPCF budget, if we can get you your dewatering machine. Because it seems like a pretty.
This ledger here, it looks like all of them combined probably have 5, 6, 7, close to 800,000. Does that sound about right, Zach? All reserves together.
What page you on, Chris, for the binder? For that document?
That's not on the binder.
Okay,
That's not on the binder, is it?
I don't
I've
think so,
got a
no.
general ledger sheet.
Okay.
It's not on the.
And so how much are you, how much are you dipping into the reserve for the Webster project?
The infrastructure.
Yeah, the infrastructure. What's that? Yeah.
That's at, even though the infrastructure is at 550. So
Okay, so that's-
Webster's gonna take 215 out of that.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's a way that we can move projects around. Because yes, 1.8 is a lot of money, but in the overall scheme of things, it's not it doesn't seem like a insurmountable amount to me that can't figure out a way to do that, since it seems to be pretty important. I mean, you've spent a page and a half talking about it in your write-up, so just wondering if there's a way that we can find that money.
And I'm also wondering, like, is this something that pays off in 10 years, or is this something that pays off in 20 years? Like, just because you're gonna lower the cost, like, eventually you're gonna be lowering the cost of dumping, you're gonna be lowering. I'm assuming that, like, the truck driver will only have to go half as many times because he won't have as much weight in his dump truck or something like that, not half, but. it
Right,
won't be
well, that
something-
dry slug will do that.
Yeah.
We'll sludge less water. Right now, we average around 12%. What's the water?
Yeah.
Percent out of 100, the rest is water. So we're paying $85 a ton to bury water, basically. So the drier you get it, the better for everybody.
Where is there, what line here is the charge to? Is it Casella? Is that where it goes?
Seller is,
It looked like maybe about 45,000 could be saved if 500 at 85.
That was my sort of mental math. Oh, I was like a little more than 40.
And so I,
41.
Yeah.
69, 671.
Sludge disposal, 131.
1193.
Yeah, okay. So
That's, yeah, and that's anticipating a rate increase, which
we'll
we'll
come.
more than likely see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
so is there a way? Could that be a good compromise that? We don't do the full Webster project. We save some money there to put towards the dewatering machine. Could that be the compromise? I'm supportive of the Webster project, but. Again, it seems like this dewatering.
Well, we've got some stuff in the works to have the machine we have now perform better.
Yeah, but how much of that is a Band-Aid?
It's not really a Band-Aid. We're gonna put new belts on it. To be honest with you, we'll probably gain maybe 3%, maybe 4% with new belts. The container will allow me to slow the press down. I'll be able to do that because I won't have to shut it off. And you get a dry cake. If you slow it, you slow it down, you're gonna get dry cake. But in order to do that, I gotta feed it, 70 gallons a minute instead of 150. And that may get us by, move us down the road a few years until we can put away money for dewatering.
Can ARPA be used for that? Just in the account.
Probably. I think that we're seeing what these incremental improvements will do to the end product.
Yeah.
I have new belts, that have just been delivered. I'm gonna change all the spray headers, on the press. Belt washing is very important. Some of the sludge gets pushed into the belt. So after the cake comes off, you need to wash it out. If you don't, it just keeps getting more and more, then it binds off and the water doesn't drain through it. So the system we have now, that wash water that you see in there with the auger, that is for a pump that's dedicated to the press. So right now, we have any water we use around the plant, wash down, is plant water. It's not city water. We use a pump system to pump it through hydrants and hoses wherever we need it. The trouble is,
Filtered?
we need it for the press too. And we can't obtain the proper pressure to wash the belts. It washes them, but not like it should. So that wash water money is to install a pump that's dedicated for fresh wash water. So that new spray headers, new belts, and being able to run it slow, I believe will get us close, if not over 20%. I also have a different polymer, which is a chemical we use for dewatering. I have my vendor that I buy it from has identified a product that may give us 1.5% better. It's the same, really, it's the same stuff. It's just a little bit, it's manufactured a little different. There's thousands of different types of polymer. And, he came in and did some bench testing on some different products and found one that he thinks works a little better. I mean, they're developing new polymers every day, so. And that's something we've done in the past, is every few years, we'll look at different products. Maybe there's somebody out there that's got one that works as good, but he's cheaper. They're all cutthroat, they're all banging on your door, hey, mine's cheaper. It's a few pennies more per pound of product, but if it gets me 1.5%, I'm willing to pay it. Because we'll save it on the end with a dry cake.
Sure.
Just that 20%, the percentage is how much is solids, is that what you said?
So 80% will still be water. But that's a much drier cake than 12. You'd be amazed the difference between 12 and 20.
Are we at 12 now, is that what you said?
It's not a good thing.
You can hold it in your hand versus not hold it in your hand.
You go first. Yeah. So the reserves. Pardon me, so a lot of the driver is the equipment reserve and the capital reserve funding. Page 90.
Page 90?
I think, well, it's on ours, page 90, page 1. You know, the description is to adequately fund future capital projects. The town allocates a portion of WPCF's revenue reserve savings. So I'm proposing a 200% increase. I don't know, 500% increase. You've gone from 41,000 to 255. And that is
That's part of the rate increase that I'm asking.
yep.
I wanted to put it all in there, but I needed to take some for the Route 2 design and.
Yep.
So the 180 is in this.
And I do want to mention Cornell and Mitch were telling me that I can use some of the downtown TIF for that design.
Ah,
So
That makes
out of
sense.
that 180, 90 is TIF.
okay. But you won't. You gotta spend it, you gotta design it no matter what, right? It's failing, it's 100 years old. It needs to be done, whether we do the Route 2 stuff or not, right?
Yeah,
Eventually.
I mean, we had an upgrade in May. Didn't address the entire plant.
Mhm.
So there are still aspects of the plant that is 1969.
You're talking about not the facility down at the bottom of the hill, you're not talking about
Right.
like the whole physical plant
No,
at this one, no, yeah.
So what?
But we're
what
not-
you just
If
saying?
we weren't doing the Route 2 corridor, these 100-year-old pipes that, you know, if we're doing it, we should replace them. How long would their continued longevity be? Like, at what point would we be replacing them anyway, even if we didn't do the Route 2 corridor?
They'd be replaced with SDR 35 PVC pipe, which have a life expectancy of 80 years.
But will you do it like in the next year or two, you do the facility stuff first, right? And then you come back and do the Route 2, the pipe.
Well, the Route 2 project would be dictated by the DOT schedule.
Yeah.
Right, no, I guess we're asking if we don't do it,
If we
when
weren't
would you
doing
do it?
If we weren't gonna do it like with 100-year-old pipes, at what point in the future, could they last another 20 years? Would we be needing to do them within 10 anyway?
I would,
Tough to say.
after I address concerns at the plant, that's probably one of the first places I would
Okay.
get when I went back into do pipes.
Gotcha.
Gotcha.
And if we
Thanks.
weren't gonna rip up, I don't know what we're doing on Route 2, I guess, but is that blown pipe? And would that be a consideration if we weren't tearing into everything?
What's that?
The, what's it called?
Bursting.
Relining?
Yeah,
Some of it maybe. The integrity of the pipe has to be pretty sound for relining. There's a lot of breaks with clay, jagged clay hanging down. So, you know, that creates bumps and stuff. As a rule, pipe needs to be pretty round. It's not really that much cheaper. We're still gonna have to replace all the structures, so you're gonna dig a hole for every manhole. You wouldn't have the open trench. Well, like I say, I've watched the videos. There's a lot of pipe in there that's not good candidate for lining.
So I, unless you had a follow-up.
no,
Okay. So I appreciate the planning. But getting back to the study, we're not actually gonna spend the money and do the study until we determined that we're actually moving forward through 2, correct?
I wouldn't do the design unless we know we're gonna move forward and.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
okay, so we're not gonna spend that money until we collectively as a society have determined, okay. So theoretically, then that, if we don't spend it this year, could be rolled over into the reserve or rolled into next year if we do the study next year.
Well, yeah, but design's gonna take a year, and
Okay.
I don't wanna be faced with, okay, DOT's ready to go, and we don't have design.
What they were telling us, I mean, you know more than I do, but they were telling us at the meeting, I mean, we're looking at 3 to 4 years out anyway, so. When
Yeah,
we
I
decide, so.
haven't heard a build out.
I think you're gonna know.
But either way, it's, we're not doing the study until we've decided we're doing the full project. Is
Were you gonna say, Gwen? You'll know more in July. Yeah.
Great.
Okay. Anything else? Sarah? Thanks.
Yes, thank you. That was all really helpful and informative. I have a completely different question. If we could go to your very first page for WPCF. I'm just trying to look at personnel numbers and make sense of those with the other personnel numbers we've been presented.
I mean,
Yeah, so I
that's-
see under resources, personnel, it appears to me that there are 5 FTEs listed here. And I'm assuming that that's the correct number, but it's confusing to me because on the FTEs over time page that we've been given, it shows that there have been 5 full-time people at WPCF, but also a part-time person all the way back to like 2014. It's showing that our total staffing at WPCF is 5.5, and that additional person is listed as a seasonal laborer. So when I look at the other page, the one I'm talking about at FTFs is in additional documents, and it is on page 188. So I'm just trying to reconcile.
Split position with Public Works that we were talking about earlier.
No, it's been there since 2014. It's not a new position. That's showing that we've been running at 5.5 at WPCF forever. And this page here at the front is showing 5. So I'm curious, who's our other half position?
It was a vacant position that we didn't fill last year, Sarah. So it used to exist, but isn't currently filled. Is that correct? That's my recollection from last year's budget cycle. I see some nods from staff.
So if we, go ahead, Chris, you go ahead.
Been running 5.5
Okay.
since 21.
5.5 or 5?
Well, 5 full-time at the WPCF. We had a shared position with Public Works.
And you had
That
that
was-
position,
That position historically was an employee that came to work at wastewater, and he stayed there for 6 months. And in the fall, he went to Public Works to plow snow for 6 months. And what's been happening is they end up liking Public Works better. When they get an open position, they transfer. And then we hire another one and it happens again. Thanks, Mike. So what we tried to do last year was have a position where he was a shared position, but he was really full-time at Public Works. And I could have access to him whenever I needed him. I didn't take him for 6 months at a time. I would just call Rob up and say, I need a guy for a week, I need a guy for 2 weeks. And I would pay half his wage.
And Rob would punish whoever was in this doghouse by sending that to you. Yeah.
okay, so Chris, this year, this past calendar year, FY 24, you've been running with 5 full-time staff and borrowing somebody from Rob when needed? Is that what I'm hearing?
That's correct.
And the budget
Yes.
you're presenting to us would be 5.5 full-time staff, or that will be billed to Public Works and not billed to you at all, this FY 25, that half position?
In my budget, it's budgeted for 26 weeks. I've got him listed as 20 hours per week. So whenever I would use him, his payroll for that time would just be coded to my line instead of Public Works.
Mhm. So the number of positions that are billed to you is gonna, on our FTE count, remains 5 with this new position hired, and it's gonna be recorded completely in Public Works? Is that correct, Cornell?
No, so he's got it budgeted at 5.5.
I have
So-
my,
So I wouldn't be changing anything if the budget were approved for a half position, because right now it's all funded. Half in Public Works starting January 1 of 25.
So, but I think what catches Sarah up is that under resources and personnel, it lists 5 people. And it's really 5.5 people, right? That's kind of how that's what it should be.
Of course, you did
So-
list that in the main numbers here, I just see that.
Is the other half of my half guy not budgeted in Public Works?
It is right now,
Until,
but starting January 1 of 25. So yes, it's budgeted in 2025 fiscal year. But not starting until January 1 of 25. So you've got it funded for July 1 of 24 to June 30 of 25 at 50%, 26 weeks.
that's correct, yep.
Okay, but this,
So- I'm still trying to get clear. So funding wise, we're adding half a position of funding to WPCF and half a position of funding to Public Works?
He's always had a half position.
Yeah, I've had that half position for close to a decade now.
Okay, so it's nothing new to your budget. It's just not showing here on the front page. So this front page under personnel should actually have 5.5 instead of 5.
It should.
Okay,
was one of
that's
the-
what I'm trying to understand. So the new position being added is beyond the one you've always had. It's a half position to Public Works, not to you.
which is technically a full position for next
Right.
year. It's
And it's
It's a-
really a full position unless we were to lay them off next June, which we would not want to do. Okay,
Which,
So you're correct. Under resources and personnel, there should be a 0.5 in there. Should be 2.5 operators, is what it should say.
thank you.
but if it is that way this year and the previous year and the previous year, then
No.
it's been, I thought we just said it's been, been that. So,
Oh, I'm thinking of Public Works.
well, that's where I'm going with this, is that
And now,
this
hasn't
is a
been the same
new,
person.
this is a new full-time position in Public Works, so I'm not sure how that plays into that.
So it isn't. So what happened is, that has always been, he's been paying Public Works for the use of a person, in theory. So it doesn't matter what person it is, he's just been paying for that half-time of help. When they moved away from the actual person. What you're adding in is back in the half position that was not there before. Okay, that's what he's asking for.
Right,
That position has always been there, and that's why it's confusing, because Chris is looking and saying, I don't actually have a person, I have help of halftime.
right, and this year, without that person, that additional person we're talking about, he still did what he's always done.
Yes.
When he needed someone, so his half doesn't have anything to do with adding, I mean, that adding back is in Public Works,
Yes.
period.
Period.
He's already been doing what he's been doing. When he needs someone, they borrow, and that all works,
Yeah,
but it's
but-
not relevant to this. I don't think it's relevant to the whole discussion about the halftime, and it feels like it's really convoluting the discussion to me.
Yep, so in 23, they had the person in Public Works. And then in 24 fiscal year, it wasn't funded. So now when he needs a person, they're taking another person to go do the work. So now they're down another employee.
Right, but it's all timing and understood.
Okay.
Yeah, I understand that also, but I think Leo's point is important, that it was very confusing at the beginning, sounding like WPCF was also short and they're not. They've still been borrowing when they need to. Who's feeling like they're short is Public Works. I understand. Thank you, Leo. That was what I needed to know.
Yep. All right, anything else for Chris before we move on? Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Next item is 3. So I guess we'll say that we don't have any meetings next week. It's Memorial Day weekend and it's holiday week, so we're out, and frankly, it's a good chance to kind of take in all that we've heard over these last several sessions, and staff has done a really good job, and particularly tip of the hat to Cornell and Zach and working so hard to get us all the documents that they've gotten us. So for us as a council, we've now had our last presentation, so we listened and heard, and now it's up. Now we have a role to play to work with Cornell to any adjustments or thoughts that we have in terms of bringing this forward. And then we have our June 3rd workshop for council budget review, and then we have our June 10th public hearing on the budget, right? So we talked for pre-work for this meeting and talked about types of things that we want to have a conversation about. Sarah's traveling, so we talked about Jacob and I kind of working with Cornell to the extent that we have during work hours. We're not going to meet from 5 to 7 at any of these times. But just, adjustments we think, we're thinking about things we're thinking, and some of those have been pluses, that talk about the traffic enforcement initiative thing and we'll have conversations about where we go with the mini grants and stuff like that. But we need to have sort of a sense of the council on where that goes, and then Jacob and I will work on take the issues that we hear from individual councilors to Cornell, and some of them, it's not like we got one chance to vote on a budget. This isn't like, you vote in. I went to the school budget yesterday and they had, was it 23 warrants or something like that? Vote them all in one at a time. That's not how our budget works, right? So we'll have to, arrive at a consensus among council in terms of what we want to present in the public hearing and what we want to bring forward for, what we heard here in the public hearing, and then a final budget that we'll adopt and approve. So that's sort of the timeline and process for us in terms of how we take feedback from what we've heard, react to it, and to the extent that we have ideas on how to shape the budget from there.
What did you just say about the grant stuff and what are we gonna do with that? When are we gonna talk about that? Like
The grant.
our little $10,000.
Oh, the mini, yeah, well, I mean, this will be what we do over the next. The little bit of direction here, but also the work that we'll do to take feedback from the council and try and work with Cornell to craft. Any adjustments that we want to see, that we want to bring back to the June, ideally, any material changes we want to make to this budget. We have worked with Cornell between now and Zach, between now and June 3rd, and we're ready to talk about it as we should in a public meeting. In terms of this is the work that we did in the interim 2 weeks. This is what we brought back for a public conversation, feedback from staff. And that's what we'll prep for the June 10th public hearing. The council will present. We're not going to present 2 different budgets. We're going to have 2 different budget presentations. We're going to have one presentation, council and manager presenting the budget.
So Dan, my understanding was you charged us all to come tonight and be ready to tell you what kind of changes we want to see. So this is our time as a council, right? To make those requests, and then you and Jacob will confer with Cornell and come back to us. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it can be directional. It can be, I don't think we're gonna sit here and go line by line through the budget. But yeah, I think directional types of things maybe you want to see. I know we've had conversations about, growth rates and expenses and things like that, and how sustainable that is. And I'm also gonna say that we have, a new manager starting a week after we put this in place, and that new manager is gonna have some opportunities to work with us in our direction over the upcoming year as well. So I see that as a real opportunity for us. This is, for a lot of us, this is our first, when we have when Clint starts July 8th, It'll be a chance for, we spent a lot of our time and energy on the search for a new manager over the last year. So it's been, I think there's some pent up interest in what we do as a council in terms of moving forward. And setting direction for spending and capital reserves and things like that, that we all, a lot of us think are important in terms of being good stewards of the tax dollars. But I don't think we can do it all in one budget either. You know, we've got work to do that'll take time.
I guess I wasn't, I didn't realize that this meeting where we were coming. I'll share my thoughts. I've already shared them, I guess. I have concerns about any staff growth because of, we step back and look at the big picture, and we've grown operational budget by about $1 million every year, including this year. And understanding that a lot of that has to be there because we've really made an effort in these past few years of catching staff salary up. I think that and then adding staff is not sustainable for the taxpayer. So I am concerned about the operational increase of 9.2%. I hope we can get that lowered. I've brought this up before as well about the capital increase. We've got a capital budget that's $1.2 million larger than any capital budget that we have record of, that we've seen.
What's that point? What was that?
$1.2 million more than any capital budget, at least in the last, however long the history we have there. Is last year was our highest at 2.1 million, and we're going to 3.3, and I'm still, despite how that capital reserve gets built up, which there's probably more to understand with that. Like, did we just over budget on projects? Did projects not get done and it go in there? I don't know those answers to those questions, but that money was not a budgeted. We allocated and paid into that. That was leftover getting swept in there. In some cases, that would be tied to a project, but again, I don't know where $400,000 comes in a year to get swept in there. It did one year, I have no idea. I don't know anything about it. So knowing that we have quite likely Route 2, knowing that we have stuff going on in public safety, as well as our other buildings, 16 million was the number floated. I'm really not comfortable with having our largest capital budget at a time when we did not have a public works director presenting this to us. So that remains a concern for me. And that, I think that's, I've shared this before, I guess. So, but I guess if this is the time, and I don't think, I guess we're not getting into, I feel like we need some more sort of analysis on the mini grant stuff too, right? And we don't know what happened or what outcomes, or I think the concept, I believe, was to encourage and start something that could be a continuation without our mini grants, I think was our original intent. And I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, is that, so wasn't that sort of the spirit of
that's the
that?
dream, right? I mean, I think it was both a chance to incentivize innovation, innovative program delivery, and also ideally it's a seed, you know, it's a seed investment in a program that could take off, you know, a proof of concept and take off. And so I don't, you know, it's too soon to tell if we've definitely delivered programming. You know, my family's been participating in some of it, and they've enjoyed it. And but I don't know that we have a sense yet what of those things will persist. What's the echo of the 2024, 2023 mini grants?
Leo, I had something to say about the mini grants. Matt may have more to say because he's the one who's been tracking and does have some kind of report back on what the programs were and all that. But from my perspective, yes, I'm interested in whether something launches, something that continues, but more than anything with mini grants, I'm interested in leveraging volunteer power, right? So yes, there was money that was invested to make those events happen, but much less than what would have been invested had we been paying staff to run those programs. So for me, whether a program continues in future years or not, I think there's value in encouraging volunteers who have good ideas that council believes would create community and build community in town to do those, because I believe that's a money saver for us. We get more programs for less money if volunteers are running them than when it's always staff.
Yep.
That's all I have to say on mini grants. Matt may have more. I do have thoughts on the budget that I'm happy to share now if it's my turn, or I can go back on mute and share later.
Let's do the mini grants first and move off of that and then come back to you on the budget stuff.
So I'm just gonna go through real quick, what we funded, for mini grants, so we can get an idea of the things that have happened. And then you, again, we can't assess necessarily all of them long-term, but many of them were like one-off events. And so we know that those probably won't continue. But, the first event that we funded, that occurred, and some of these are funded and haven't occurred yet, but the first one that funded and we occurred was at the potluck where we had the Frey Greenlaw family. They hosted Jason Brown, who's also the Wabanaki tribe, to perform at one of our potlucks, and that potluck had at least, I counted 90 adults there. We probably were over by our capacity, but that was a
I think
huge,
it's 120.
So
yeah.
I don't want to interrupt.
Speculation.
Yeah.
But that was our biggest one.
Yesterday, when I got here, there was a nice little sheet because I got here late. Maybe you could just email that around.
Yeah, let's do,
Outlining
Yeah,
all the.
I agree. We don't need to hear it all. It's on a page. Yeah.
let's talk about though, when we come back on the third, and to be clear, not looking to bring back a new budget on the third. I think we bring back, these are the 10 or 12 or 15 things we've discussed. Jacob and I, and anyone who's wanted to give input, have kind of looked into these things, what the impact would be, and then we'll have a conversation in public about, yes, it's in, no, it'll be like yeah, we have consensus around that, we don't have consensus around that. I think that's the right way to do it in terms of a public process as well. So I want to be clear that we're not looking to write a budget, make changes. We'll discuss any changes and we'll present. I think the charge to us will be to kind of take what we think we've heard and work with staff to bring in a potential change document that will just
On the
work through
third, correct?
on the third.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you, Sarah? Is that what you're?
Yeah, I think it's really important that we do a lot of work because on the third, we're a week away from the public budget presentation. So, and the third, we need to leave clear on what we're building and presenting. So, all right, do you want me to go?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to start by seconding what Leo said. I am uncomfortable with the size of our operational budget growth. So again, depends which one of the numbers you look at. I believe the 9.2% is the correct number to look at. It doesn't include the debt and doesn't include the TIF. But whichever budget number you look at, that one shows 9.2. The original number that Cornell gave us, including debt and TIF, is 7 point something. Either way, they're much higher than inflation. And I really want to see operating costs be growing at a rate that's comparable with inflation. I don't believe it's sustainable to keep growing our operating budget higher than inflation. Once we grow the operating budget, it's not like we can easily shrink it because that is primarily people's jobs. And we don't want to be in a position of laying people off. I've heard us all say it. So for me, my top priority for a different draft of this budget would be that the 7% number come down to something close to 5. And if you're starting from the 9% number, then I'd want to see that come down to 6. My second thing is, in agreement with Leo, I'm not interested in adding any FTEs to staffing going into FY25. I feel like I would be open to those discussions once we've got a new manager on board and some kind of real systemic look at what's happening in central office growth. I know we keep hearing that we're just adding back in an assistant manager position, but in fact, we added a full-time payroll and benefits person this year. So if we add the full-time assistant manager back in, we've added a full FTE to the central office, and I want more discussion about that. I'm not ready to do that this year. So I'd say those are my top 2 things. I want to see operating cost growth that's much closer to inflation. And I don't want to add any FTEs into the FY25 budget. The other thing I would say, you asked about additions. There was a line item in the budget for FY24, which we did not expend. I don't know the exact title. It was something about 360 evaluations and whatever the textable feedback to the community service was. We never expended it, but we budgeted for it last year. I believe that budget was 10,000. I think something that goes toward that is important in the budget. We've signed a new contract with our new town manager promising that we will do 360 evaluations. Perhaps they can be built internally at no cost, but, or perhaps we could say we're going to take that out of the council contingency fund if needed. But I want us to at least be clear on where we're planning to get that money from. If there is a cost that ends up being associated. And I was personally bummed we didn't try the textable feedback this year because that seemed like a terrific way to get immediate feedback from the community on issues. And I would like to try that in a coming year. So as I said, I think it was 10, maybe it was 5. I'm guessing staff can find that figure. And yep, I think that's all the things that I have. I would like to keep some community event fund. That's a combination of whatever we decide to do for mini grants or Artsapalooza. I know Megan has a fund in Parks and Rec, but it's only like 1,500 total. So I guess I'm thinking I'd like to see a fund. I do believe that community is more than just our infrastructure and pipes and fire and police and all of those things. It's also the events we have that bring us together. I don't want a big fund, but this year it seems like we've spent 17 between Arts Fest and the mini grants. I guess I'd like to see some similar figure for next year for events that are community building events. And that is everything that I have to say. Thanks. And I believe we already have 10,000 in the budget right now, I guess I should say, for mini grants. So I think the only question is whether we add something else that could fund Arts Fest or whether that also would have to come out of council contingency. Thank you.
Jacob?
Yeah, won't go into too much depth since you and I, Dan, will be working on this, but I agree with Sarah Leo. I'd like to keep our operating expenses to CPI, whether that's capping staff growth or finding other ways. I would really like to try to do that. The other piece is there are, so I'm in supportive of the community fund, whatever we want to call it, you know, whether it's mini grants. I do think that we need to develop an actual program around mini grants, but whether it's, you know, that it's a combination of that and then Orono days or what have you. But I'm good with that. I feel pretty strongly though, wherever that number ends up, that shouldn't be an expense add. I don't think it's fair to, you know, ask Cornell or others to cut, you know, 5% out of the budget while we as a council are adding in an additional $7,000 or whatever for community events. I think we should figure out where we can get that money from. So same with the additional police funds. It's a great idea, but let's figure out where we can get those funds from instead of just expense at.
Sonia?
Well, I suppose I share the concern about the growth operating expenses. I think in my reading of this, and I would be wrong, a big contributor to the disproportionate, or not disproportionate, but the growth beyond inflation seems to come a lot from us bringing our employee salaries up to a reasonable place, which is not going to be happening every year. I mean, I do think we need to get a handle on the overall growth trends, which I also agree feel a little unsustainable. But I do want to see us overall try to meet inflation as much as we can. I also want to say I don't have an interest in slashing a ton. If I would not have an interest in slashing, obviously, that's a big word.
No slashing.
Yeah,
Yeah, I wrote it down.
but I would be concerned about, I think, trying to find major cuts here to bring that number down when, again, in my reading, which could be wrong, a big portion of it is just trying to bring employee salaries back up where all the other work still needs to keep happening. And I might be reading wrong where that disproportionate increase is occurring. I do echo far more strongly the concern about adding additional FTEs. I'm open to adding some. I think we need to examine those and figure out where, if we need them, where they're most needed, and be careful about adding them, because once we add a person, we don't want to take people away. I don't think that's the will of anybody here on the council. So I suppose that's one thing that I want us to take an extra look at, is just where are FTEs potentially being added. I'm less concerned about if we can bring it down to inflation without causing a ton of pain and heartache, I think that's great. But I'm curious to see where that might happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also am interested in seeing our increase be closer to proportional to inflation, although we'll echo some of Rob's sentiments. I also did hear, and I'm thinking about the sort of mowing as a pinch point for our public works in the summer. And so if like, as a potential addition, even if that's not a half-time person, I'd be interested in exploring a little bit more contract service to help with mowing, or some addition to, if you know, in conversing with Cornell and with Public Works, there's something less than half a person that could still make a difference in a pinch point for Public Works. I'd be interested in considering that as a potential tweak to the budget. And I think other than that, many of my thoughts echo some combination of what Sarah and Rob have said, so I'll keep it brief.
Okay.
And I'll email you if other things come
Sure.
up after this meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear about what the community thinks of the mini grants. If we could, it would have been nice to have the texting, see what people have to say about that. To see if that's a priority for the community. But going into the future, maybe we can do that if we decide to continue the program. And if we did decide to continue the program, I agree with Jacob that there has to be a much more guidelines and a little bit more direct reason, but you learn by doing. When it comes to the overall budget, I know from people who talk to me that this is difficult, it is difficult at times to pay taxes. And so I'm concerned with I've always, when I ran for election, people were concerned. And it was something that I'm concerned about. So I would like to see us try to use the money as best we can and try and stay within inflation as best we can. With the understanding that some years may not be, we can't, taking into account all the factors that can happen in any one single year. But and I'm concerned about where we could be if we don't take a hard look at staffing. But I'd like to hear from Clint as we go forward about staff, because I also don't want to fall down on the job.
Okay,
Dan, can I say?
sure, please.
In this conversation about inflation, I seem to recall last year, us sort of throwing this ball around, which I think most of us felt pretty strongly. Let me give some context. For the education, for the RSU budget, I want to make sure that in our pursuit of trying to see how far we might be able to match inflation, that we are not at all trying to compensate for any increases from the school side. I'm interested in our side, and I don't want, so I feel like it's worth saying out loud that, I'm not interested in us, cutting extra.
Cutting
if we
spending
cut
to make up
things.
for the increase in
Exactly.
the school side. I get you.
Thank
Yep.
you.
That's not, yeah.
I just know it was mentioned last year, and I think we didn't have a lot of appetite for it, and I don't know if we've really mentioned that yet this time. Just want to say out loud that I'm not for that.
I would say, I think, in terms of kind of the feedback I'll say tonight and then the work we'll do, I think that it's important to me that taxpayers are heard, particularly those who are concerned about, the taxes and recognizing that the municipal side is, despite municipal side is the minority of what the tax burden is for local taxpayers, and we have, so that's the lane we're in. I do think it makes sense. I think about our best opportunities to show taxpayers they're being heard and to make changes that can really make a difference is kind of more long-term thinking, more partnership type thinking in terms of the collaboration we can do with the school, the university, pursuing revenue opportunities that we currently don't. And those are kind of longer term issues. They're not something we're gonna solve between, not concepts we're gonna come up with between now and the end of June when we have to approve our budget. I think when we talk about, the increases in this budget, we were very supportive of supporting staff and the contract with the police department union and the instruction we gave Cornell in terms of the firefighters union and that to be designed and the support we provide to staff. So I think there's some element of recognizing we're still in a transition period in terms of catching up on salaries, and we need to have a longer term conversation. We can't just keep throwing money, there has to be, we have a tremendous workforce challenge, particularly when it comes to first responders. And that's something we're gonna have to try and address, I think regionally, in the longer term, as opposed to just trying to, I don't keep race to get a smaller and smaller number of people who want to work in the space. She's kind of racing higher and higher in competition with the communities around us to hire the fewer and fewer people that want to work in the space is not a long-term solution. And I think that when we talk about longer term opportunities for our budget in terms of, fiscal management, fiscal control and goal setting for our department heads. So it's not, May 21st when we're having this conversation, but, July 2nd when we're going, we're just starting the fiscal year as opposed to just the end. Some sort of standard in terms of inflation tied to increases in valuation. I think inflation may be too narrow, but maybe there's something to do with inflation and, new valuations on the books. I'm not interested in, somebody's heat pump, and what that does to their valuation in terms of a tax assessment. But, when Tyler Tech comes on, the hotels at UMaine come on, those kinds of things, that's new valuation. And, longer term, I'd like us to think about, kind of setting expectations that our growth will be constrained within that, because it's so much about our revenue stream that's beyond our control. Last year, we maxed out to the revenue sharing. I mean, it got back up to the statutory limit. This year's growth in state revenue that's really driving the increased revenue that we're experiencing. And that's very cyclical money for us to build our budgets on and create. And I think frankly, a lot of the angst that we have about growth in FTE counts and budgets here is the real concern that there's a day of reckoning coming down somewhere down the road where we have to make hard decisions that are going to impact services to the people of Orono or the livelihood of the people that work for Orono.
Yeah.
And we don't want to be, we want to avoid that to the extent we can. So that's not, I hear what everyone else is saying and I think about these things in those terms as well. So I don't know,
Dan?
Cornell, go ahead, Sarah.
When you're
have
done,
something?
I just have two things I realized I wanted to add.
Sure.
One is I just wanted to say, what I don't want to see us do is close the pool or reduce the Parks and Rec program. So if we are asking staff, those are things that we've heard strongly from the community for a lot of years now, that they've been top priorities to build and keep open. So I just want that on the record for me. And the other thing that I wanted to say is that I would like to hear from staff a timeline for when they want council's input on whether we are willing to take over funding the fire positions that are currently funded by grants. That grant is due to end in in February of 2026, so about a year and a half. And I would like to know, does staff want to know from us whether we're willing to take on that additional $225,000 in cost a month before that, 6 months before that, a year before that? And I want us to plan accordingly as a council, because I don't, again, want to be in a situation where we don't want to continue or pick up the extra funding when the grant goes away, and that's a surprise and causes any trouble, you know, with staff who are currently there no longer having a job or something. So I don't need us to look at eliminating those positions. I understand they're grant funded, and that's great, but the grant is going to run out and it will cost us money when that happens. And I want us to get an answer from staff on how much leeway time they need to plan accordingly, and for council to follow up and get them the information when they need it, to not be surprised by that decision. Thank you.
I think that we absolutely need that. It's tough to get an answer from staff who aren't gonna be here when those, I mean, I think we may have to wait a little bit and, you know, engage with Clint and our new fire chief when we have that search done for that, so.
That's 100% fine. I just wanted on our record to follow up on. Thank you.
It's on tape. Thank you. Cornell, I know we didn't ask you to have any closing remarks on any of this, and we'll work with you, you know, as give you a chance, but I don't know if you wanted to share anything.
And talk about, but you know, I just look at some of these increases in areas that we can't touch, but IT, that's a contract. That's, you know, up 62%. Elections, well, that's not much, but it's up 20%. Assessing, that's up due to contract and legal. The police department, increase in wages, council approved. That can't be touched. The fire department, increase in wages, we're negotiating that. The environmental, 99,000, it's up 17%. That's a contract. You know, there's some fixed costs that just, so if you exclude those increases, it's gonna be hard to get to inflation. Off the top of my head, I don't know what that number will be, but
And you've also taken some good steps forward in terms of budgeting for stuff in the future that I think is important and probably aligns with what we'd want to do as, you know, financial stewards, so.
Dan?
There's probably not one perfect solution, and but I want to recognize that, and, you know, recognize the extremely challenging position that is building municipal budgets, but let's all try to, you know, do our best and crunch some possibilities and be ready to make what feel like really responsible decisions. So, yeah.
Sarah, do you have anything else before we wrap up? Oh, we
No,
have-
I really appreciated Cornell's comment, because I've looked closely too, and I agree with you. There's not a lot, which is why I cycled back to the additional FTEs, because they are something that's optional and they do bring that number down significantly. Not adding FTEs brings 7.5 growth down to something just barely over 6 right there. So I don't want to not add positions if staff wants them, but it's the only thing I see. If other folks find something else, I am open to anything else. But I agree with Cornell. It's going to be hard. Most of the costs are fixed and can't be changed. So I appreciate the difficulty of that, Cornell, and don't envy you your job. And I'm incredibly grateful. And I just want to say that's the only reason that I'm looking at not adding FTEs, because I don't see where else we can possibly keep our budget growth to something that's sustainable. And as everyone's already spoken about, sustainable. So I won't say anything about that. Thanks.
And we will, just to give comfort to those who, you know, whose livelihood depend on the budget, we're gonna bring something that's reasonable and responsible, right? We're not talking about, I think, well, people have different, you know, everyone's gonna have their own opinion, but so we're gonna work hard to bring something back that makes sense. Frederica?
I'm Frederica Smith, speaking as an Orono taxpayer. do pay taxes each year. One of my concerns is that I've heard some discussion about not having the assistant manager. And I think there's several issues that the council needs to look at and maybe get some help from staff to balance out. I recall Mitch in economic development telling us that 25 hours of the assistant manager's time went to economic development. If we don't have that, can economic development be continued, which ultimately offsets taxes? And I think that's particularly important because Mitch, as the economic development director, has picked up a lot of other responsibilities. He certainly can't add that 25 hours to his job. Can't be done. The second thing that I know that the assistant manager did was to write grant requests. I have no idea what grant requests were written. I have no idea what they brought in. I think those are figures that somebody probably can retrieve. But I would use as a comparison the grants that Megan, is it the economic?
Yes, yep. Yep.
Technology person. She brought in $200,000 worth of grants in the last 2 years. If the assistant manager is bringing in comparable numbers relative to salary, far more than pays his or her salary to do that. And so I think as you're looking at those positions, you need to think about what it offers in terms of revenue, not just what it costs up front.
Yeah.
And you know, how much of that you can project is very hard for me to guess, but I think Mitch and Cornell probably and Zach have some numbers they can give you all as you're trying to assess, particularly the assistant manager position. The other thing I would say is that I know that Belle, as the assistant manager, worked a lot more than 40 hours a week. I know that Sophie, as the town manager, was working probably at least 60, often 70 hours a week. She was on the job at 5 a.m. and often didn't go home until after a meeting at 7 at night. Day after day, working weekends. If that work isn't getting done, what happens to it? And if all of that work gets transferred to other members of the staff, do they stay? I ran my own medical practice for years. The advice we were given said that every time a staff person leaves, it takes you 6 months' salary that you lose before the next person is up to speed. So you have to keep that in mind as well. What does it take to keep your good people? Because it costs you 6 months' salary every time you lose somebody. So.
Thank you. Okay. Anything else? Next workshop is June 3rd, so we have some work to do before then, and we won't see each other for a while, and that's probably need a break.
That's
good. That's
okay.
great. Yeah, it's all right. I'll miss you, but it's Cornell is happy.
Yeah, Cornell.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to staff today.